Good afternoon, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Everybody awake? You guys had lunch? Was okay. Unfortunately, we don't have space. I would normally, after lunch, get everybody up and do some exercises. I think it's kind of tight in here, so we won't do that. But thank you for the opportunity. I'd like to thank everyone. I'm thrilled to be invited here and to speak to you guys about the RBPM communication with the industry throughout the review cycle of an ANDA. So, as Don just demonstrated, this is our process is it's elaborate, and we have a very integrated process with a lot of folks involved in that process. And my division has RBPMs for original ANDAs, and then I also have PMs who cover supplement NDAs and supplement ANDAs. So they have no easy task, and we are a very large organization. But basically, I'm going to go back over that ANDA review timeline just to show you all some samples of where we may reach out or where you may expect to begin to hear from us, and then just lightly touch on moving forward how that's going to potentially evolve. I want to also talk about just typical OPQ communications and highlight some important points for you all. We have a few suggestions from our experiences thus far, and then finally I'm going to go over some frequently asked questions. So if anybody's been keeping up with some of the Senate committee hearings where Dr. Woodcock has spoken, you guys will notice, or you may or may not have, but one of our aspirations is to decrease the number of cycles for approval for an ANDA. And the being able to communicate effectively with industry throughout the review cycle process will help us achieve that goal. So as Don showed the timeline here, the first 60 days essentially is where the team is being formed, and we're beginning to do our upfront assessments. In typically that kickoff, we aim to have that kickoff. So the first 2 months are really critical for us, but after that, what happens is that the RBPM will coordinate with the review team and set interim milestones. And one of the first significant milestones for us is when we're going to send out a cumulative information request. So that could happen in the first 5 to 6 months. And this is hypothetical, and this is also as we move towards GDUFA 2, there will be more consistency with some of the newer GDUFA 2 metrics, but this is very similar to that in the timing. But midway through, we aspire to have been able to send you all a cumulative information request. Most of our communication throughout the review cycle is primarily sent via the IRs, and we basically that function typically involves you guys getting a formal email with the attached document of the information request. And what that is an accumulation of comments, questions, basically things that were discovered by the review team during that first round of review, if you will. So the review team will relay everything to the RBPM, and we will compile everything and then send out as comprehensive of an information request as possible. And I should pause there. I word it that way because there are some scenarios where some of our concerns may be more significant, and an information request may not be the most appropriate vehicle to communicate them to you. However, we will, as much as possible, have as much dialogue with you throughout the review cycle. So. Something else worth noting is that the RBPM will always inform the OGD the OGD RPM when IRs are sent. That's really important with goal dates in mind, and as we approach GDUFA dates, and we have internal deadlines that we all aspire to adhere to. It's important that you all recognize that we communicate frequently with the operations office, the project management staff, and the Office of Generic Drugs. Okay. Some of the important points to consider. Contact the RBPM for all questions related to the quality-only correspondence received, and that's basically would be for the IRs that you all receive from us. I know at times it can get confusing because the RPM is what we call the project owner, and that would be your primary point of contact or your go-to. However, when we send you all a separate communication that doesn't include them, please feel free to contact us with regards to concerns for those communications. Again, also continue to use the RPM as your main point of contact for general inquiries. What we experience a lot, and sometimes it's a convenience, you may have the RBPM on the phone about the IR that you received, and it's, hey, by the way, what's the status on my labeling review? While we may be able to access a snapshot in an IT database, we are not equipped to answer for the labeling status or potentially policy issues. So that wouldn't be appropriate for us to answer on behalf of the entire application. So we ask that is honored, but we do appreciate and understand the convenience, and you guys are just trying to get information. So we understand the position from a regulatory standpoint, which you all are tasked with as well. Be aware of your information request response deadline. This is important. We talked about, and you'll see this a few times because this and 356H you'll see probably a few times. But this is important because, as I mentioned, with GDUFA dates, this is a new paradigm in the generic world. And before, we could issue what was most similar to an information request, for example, would be a chemistry deficiency letter. There really was no timeline for us to act on it at the end. I mean, barring a patent a forfeiture or exclusivity date or a patent expiration date, the deadlines didn't exist prior to now. But if we send an information request, we've taken into consideration the necessary time on the back end to review that request. And we ask that you guys, honor the deadline, and I'll expand a little more shortly on that. The next bullet is basically, and I should actually, maybe this could have been worded differently, but basically it says only respond to IR with requested information because additional unsolicited information may impact the review timeline and goal dates. So this could have maybe been worded differently as just so that you guys understand, because you may have a business need to submit additional information more than what we asked for. It may make business sense for you, understanding that it could potentially extend the GDUFA clock. So that is not a finite only respond to. We would, in the ideal scenario, we would only get back what we asked for. However, we understand that there may be additional information. And in those scenarios, I would encourage you to maybe reach out to the RBPM and let them know that there is additional information, and that will help us on the triage front. It would be a faster triage, and we'd have a clearer understanding of a path forward with regards to the GDUFA clock. And then finally, correctly code all the submissions and amendments to ensure accurate triage and goal dates applied. This is really important. The first cut of everything that comes to the door is by document room staff. And if there is information that you think may be easily seen on a cover letter, it's not necessarily always understood. So there are things sometimes that get past document room staff that would be caught at a project management level upon triage. And my best advice is to prominently code all of your submissions and amendments. So, if it's a response to an information request, a quality information request, put all of that in there. If there are facility changes, please prominently put that at the front of the cover letter. That will help you guys and us as well tremendously. And then the facility changes. So clearly identify all changes for all submissions. That's very straightforward. Ensure all facilities and their responsibilities are clearly listed on the 356H. That question came up a couple times earlier. My best advice, I think maybe a question about excipients came up or something of that nature. I would recommend default including every facility you have, and we will rule out the need for, we will determine the level of assessment needed internally. So having everything on there is more helpful than not having enough on there, because we may need to reach out and ask about, can you clarify with facilities, and then that becomes, was this solicited or unsolicited if I had to send in new information. So it's very straightforward if from the jump you guys have all of the facility information listed on the 356H. And then also Rosie from filing, the question came to her about how to handle withdrawn facilities on the 356H. I would say, now she can speak from a filing standpoint, my recommendation would be to include it on the 356H and mark it as withdrawn, at least on that first submission when you're withdrawing it. Subsequent submissions, I think it's less of a problem if you omit it, but it should be on there in addition to prominently being stated on the cover letter that a facility is being withdrawn. And these are some common themes that we've had from more technical, well, aside from the facility piece, but some of these are technical in nature, but just some of the common themes of reasons why we've had to send out information requests. The first one, again, is missing or unclear facility information and responsibilities. So, make sure that the 356H has the most current and complete information for your application. Another thing that we see is lack of justification for future scale-ups or potential future scale-ups. If you have intentions to scale up, we encourage you strongly to include that development work and then your commercial process moving forward. We've seen scenarios where in-process controls or justification for in-process criteria are missing. So I would encourage you guys to keep that in mind. Insufficient process or product knowledge. I guess an example could be the next bullet point, or addressing or failure to address the issue of microbiological growth and controls during manufacturing of non-sterile oral dosage forms. So again, those are some of the common themes that we see or we have where we feel like we reach out frequently that it would be beneficial if you guys, if that was submitted in advance and we already had that information. Now I have some frequently asked questions that I'm confident are going to eliminate the need for me to answer any questions on the panel. You guys got to prove me right. We'll see. But the first one is, can we submit a partial response to the information request? Your ability to completely respond to the information request on time and completely has to be discussed or should be discussed with the RBPM as soon as possible. Basically, that will allow us to assess the situation and consider our resource needs and then how comprehensive of a review we can do if you only do give us a partial response. But this could lead to additional review cycles or it could delay action on the application depending on the sequence of events. What do I do if I have a new facility or want to remove an existing facility? I told you guys this was going to be on here a lot. All facility changes need to be reflected on the 356H as well as prominently showing on the cover letter. If the change is a gratuitous amendment, please be aware that this may alter the GDUFA goal date or the TAD. The target action date is for applications that don't have a GDUFA date. They were basically pre-cohort 3 of GDUFA 1. What if we can't respond to the information request within the requested time frame? You should reach out to the RBPM in the first 7 days, and you can discuss the circumstances. As mentioned, we consider our resource needs, but in addition, not only that, but we do we do our best to estimate how long we think it would take for you guys to respond to our requests. And so typically, a month or so is probably the average request. We've seen extensions go an additional 30 days, so sometimes up to 60 days. We've seen requests, we've just issued requests recently where we want a 1-week turnaround. So it really will depend, and we do consider your needs, but keep in mind we are bound to the GDUFA dates, and that's not an option necessarily for us to miss in most circumstances. Why can't we get more time to respond to the IR? I think it's somewhat straightforward, but again, the extension request should come within the first week. But you guys should, but you have to keep in mind the ultimate goal on your application. So I think we all have a mutual interest. We want approvals probably just as much, maybe more than you guys. But I think that's our mutual interest, and as much as we could get to that point, we will. However, we do have to consider the review clock for the GDUFA dates and also the target action dates. Then where can I find the most recent 356H form? So this is just a link. You guys can utilize this if there are any questions on that or if you need to access that. And finally, if there are any questions before you submit it, especially with regards to a response to your information request, please feel free to reach out to the RBPMs. I would much rather you guys ask if you're uncertain as opposed to guessing or, so we're here to help and learn, and there may be things we don't understand on your side, so I strongly encourage the communication between the RBPMs and then our counterparts in industry. And that's it. Thank you.